Economic efficiency is a key issue in tax policy that is frequently ignored in public policy debates on taxation. However, there is a great reason to focus on efficiency because not all taxes are created equal. The economic costs of taxes differ and some taxes impose greater costs in society than others. Therefore, logic would dictate that society should rely more on the less costly taxes and less on the more costly taxes. So what taxes cost us more? In Canada, consumption taxes cost the government 26 cents to raise another dollar. That is 26% of all GST you pay doesn't even make it to the government. If you think that is bad, it costs the government 92 cents to raise another dollar of your income tax. 92% of the income taxes you pay goes to pay for the administration costs associated with the income tax code. Canada is unique within the industrialized world of OECD countries in terms of our comparatively high reliance on income and profit taxes and our relatively low reliance on consumption taxes. Horizontal equity requires that individuals and households with similar incomes face similar tax burdens. Unfortunately, Canada's current income tax system fails to achieve horizontal equity, as some forms of income like certain fringe benefits go untaxed while others like dividend income are subject to double taxation. Businesses are also subject to different tax rates depending on exemptions and loopholes secured through their lobbying efforts. There also exists biases towards two-income families against one-income families. Families with equal incomes pay different amounts of income tax depending on how the income is distributed within the family. The bias results from the fact that the single earner faces higher income tax rates than a multiple earner family with the same income. Vertical equity is based on the notion that individuals and families with higher incomes should have to pay higher fractions of their incomes in taxes. The principle of vertical equity is most often used to justify Canada's progressive income tax rates. Progressivity simply means that the share of income one pays in taxes increase as one earns more income. If you look at this chart, our system doesn't seem to be as progressive as it should be. The tax rates of the richest 1% of Canadians have dropped dramatically since 1990, while poorer Canadians have seen their tax rates rise. The tax system is still progressive for middle-income earners in Canada, but not for upper-income earners. Not only do the top 1% pay a lower tax rate than they did in 1990, their rate is actually slightly lower than that paid by the poorest 10%. This is worse than the USA, where there has been increasing pressure to restore progressivity and to increase taxes on the rich. In the US, the top 1% pay similar rates to those in the 60th 80th percentile. Canada's federal personal income tax rate is 29% on all incomes above $129,000. That's much lower than the current top rate of 35% in the US, a rate that's likely to rise soon because billionaire Warren Buffett suggested it would be a good idea because billionaires and millionaires aren't paying their fair share of taxes. Once realized, stock options are taxed at half the rate that Canadians pay on employment income. If those options were taxed like any other income, the top 100 CEOs, who on average earned $6.6 million in 2009, would be paying an extra $471,000 in taxes and still have millions left over.
Public choice theory suggests that politicians seeking mutually beneficial relationships with special interest organizations and specific groups of voters determine tax policy. This means that politicians support tax reform when the new system is likely to provide them with more votes and greater campaign contributions than the current system. Professor James Paterva of MIT's Department of Economics in Cambridge, Massachusetts says, "There is no doubt that the political factors, notably the political power of various interest groups, play a key role in the determination of tax policy." Chris Edwards, the Director of Tax Policy Studies at the CATO Institute, is a top expert on federal and state tax and budget issues in the US. He too noticed that politicians will always be tempted to carve out narrow tax breaks for favored groups. So who are these various favored interest groups with political power? You guessed it, corporations. Few Canadians would defend the current income tax system for its simplicity. Albert Einstein, the man who conceived the general theory of relativity, once said that the hardest thing in the world to understand is the income tax. The Income Tax Act alone has grown from 11 pages in 1917, including all regulations, and now contains over 2,800 pages. Canada and the US are very similar in this respect. In 1903, the entire US tax code was 400 pages. By the end of the Second World War in 1945, the code was 8,200 pages. In 1995, it was 40,500 pages. Today, it is 72,536 pages. This population pyramid shows that the baby boomers are beginning to enter their retirement years. On average, the retirement of Canada's boomers has begun in 2010 and will spread out over the next 2 decades. The senior population was 12.6% of the total population in 2000. It is now 14.5% and expected to be 21.4% in 2026. That means in 2026, there will be one senior out of every 5 people. These pie charts represent the incomes from non-seniors, those 64 and under, and those seniors 65 and over. On the left, non-seniors on average depend on employment for 78% and self-employment for 6% of their incomes. These two both represent significant areas of taxation for government. Non-seniors depend on pensions for only 3% and tax exemptions for only 2% of their incomes. These 2% represent government expenditures. On the right, you can see seniors are very different. They depend on pensions for 58% and tax exemptions for 6% of their incomes, both representing government expenditures. Seniors only depend on employment for 7% and self-employment for 2% of their total incomes. This chart shows incomes broken down by age groups. Since the retired population usually earns less income than employed people, the average taxable income will likely decrease with population aging. The average net federal tax for seniors is about $4,800, which was considerably less than that of persons under 65 at about $6,100. The average taxable income and income tax payable per return will show a decline from 2011 when the baby boomers reached their retirement age. A study commissioned by the Group of 10 concluded that government revenues would be adversely affected as the baby boom generation moves from its high income generating years to retirement. Countries whose revenues depend heavily on income or payroll taxes, such as Canada, will face deterioration in government revenues. Meanwhile, expenses are expected to skyrocket. Take elderly benefits, for example. This chart here shows elderly benefits as a percentage of GDP. Today, elderly benefits provided by the government are 2.25% of total GDP. They're expected to rise steadily until 2035 and peak at 3.5%. Next, we look at something called the dependency ratio. It is the ratio of those who are not working divided by the working population. The non-working population is dependent on the working age population to pay for the largest portion of government revenues. The majority of these revenues pay for the social benefits of the non-working population. If the dependency ratio increases, it brings into question the viability of the many public programs we have, particularly pensions and healthcare. As you can see from this graph, youth dependents continue to shrink as they enter the workforce. Meanwhile, senior dependents continue to rise, surpassing youth around 2026. This also shows that for every 100 people working today, there are 60 dependents. By 2026, this will rise to 70 dependents per 100 persons employed. By 2046, it will be 80 dependents for every 100 persons employed, 50 of which will be seniors. Healthcare is also expected to be a significant concern. Healthcare's share of provincial program spending is projected to rise from 45% in 2005 to about 55% in 2025. Healthcare spending is projected to grow faster than GDP, averaging 6% annually from the period of 2009 to 2010 to the period of 2024 to 2025. Meanwhile, the impending retirement of the baby boom generation presents the possibility of emerging labor market shortages, most significantly in the area of healthcare. Boomers will also use up a larger portion of healthcare services. However, economics professor David Foote of the University of Toronto said in an Institute for Research on Public Policy report that the challenge with respect to healthcare is not so much about securing adequate funding. Rather, he suggests that the baby boom generation would finance the lion's share of its healthcare costs via taxes collected on current income and future RRSP withdrawals. The challenge, then, will be to develop an efficient and effective system of healthcare delivery and to find the staff necessary to deliver services.